guys, it's Sophie, and today I wanted to talk to you about the books that I have read in the month of May. I read quite a lot of books every month, so I've decided to split these into two halves. So this will be part one. I know it's a little bit late, 16th rather than the 15th, but you know, it's fun. So, in no particular order, purely because it's the way the graphic novels stand up on the shelves. The first book is going to be St. Lucy's Home for Girls Raised by Wolves. So this is a book of short stories that sort of follow children in lots of different kinds of adventures and lots of different sort of magical situations, really. They're almost fairy tale-esque, these stories. So I did enjoy this book. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I thought the writing was very beautiful, but I did think that perhaps it was a bit overhyped. I was expecting to be really blown away by them. It was still very good. I'm still excited to read Vampires in the Lemon Grove, which I also have to hopefully get through this month. But it wasn't quite as spectacular as I imagined. Having said that, I've underlined sort of a few pieces in this one that I wanted to share with you, just a line or so, just to give you an idea of what the writing style is like and a few of my favourite sort of pieces. Okay, so here's an example for you. It's that dread, half-second lapse in the morning that gets me, when time's still a jumble of tenses at the foot of my bed, and I start awake with the certainty that I can actually do something to prevent disaster. So yeah, I just really like it. I really like that phrase in particular, and I would recommend you read this one if you like short stories, or if you like fairy tales as well. I think there's definitely an element of fairy tale in here. And the next book is The Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd. I very much enjoyed this book. Essentially, there is a young girl who has been living at home with her father, who she doesn't have a good relationship with, and decides that she doesn't want to be in that situation anymore. And it's a really feminist book in a way that I wasn't expecting at all. And it's not your sort of traditional feminist book. I think it only really hit me toward the very end that it was, and that it's more about mothers than it is about loss or the violence or mistreatment that she had previously. And I understand why people were so, you know, wanted me to read this one so badly, and I'm glad you guys did, because it was one, it's a very old copy I have, and I bought it sort of second hand, and I might not have actually read it otherwise, so thank you so much. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars and would recommend that you read this one. If you do like stories with sort of strong female influence, and it's very easy to read. I mean, I read it in most of it in a night. So yeah, I would recommend that one. And the next book is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. I don't know why this one took me so long. Again, it's another one that would have just sat there. I absolutely loved this book. It was so good, and oh my goodness, I'm just fangirling, but story first. Essentially, there is a war between humans and these creatures that they call buggers, which are like kind of bee insect creatures. And there's been 2 wars already, and there's the 3rd war, and they know that they need to have someone who can make it so the humans don't lose this 3rd war. So they think, do you know what, we need to start young, and they start training up very young children to fight in the war, and to sort of learn how to, you know, command a group of people and do all the systematic things of battle. And Ender's one of these children, and he is, you know, throughout the story involved in those activities, and I can't tell you what happens if you don't already know, because spoilers. I was spoiled. It was how the book was sold to me, and it didn't change anything for me. So if you do already know, it's still worth reading, because it's still really good. Yeah, I really like this. I'm really glad I read this one this month, and I really want to read the others, but I'm worried they aren't going to be as good, because I know this one gets talked about a lot more, but we'll see. And the next book was one that I was actually quite nervous about picking up, and just was doing the sort of the battle books and wanted something relatively easy. So I chose this one as a bit of a cop-out because I was halfway through it, but it is finished now, and that's Haunted by Chuck Palahniuk, or however you say it. I still didn't like it. I liked it better when I knew I was halfway through it, And the mix of poetry and short story is nice to make the novel up. The storyline is that there are a group of people who have different, varying, odd lives, who all end up at this writer's retreat. And they decide to make it into a hell for themselves, and it's their hell and their backstories. But it's just too far. It's not necessarily the gore, it's ridiculous and odd and weird, and I didn't like it, but I've read it. I gave this one 1 out of 5 stars. And the next book I read is Fragments, which is the second book in the Partials trilogy by Dan Wells. And yeah, I thought this one was pretty solid. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I can't go into the storyline too much. It's essentially sort of dystopian / sci-fi. If you like dystopian YA sci-fi, have a look at Partials on Goodreads, which is the first book in the series, and I'd recommend. I think it's quite a solid series, to be honest. And the next 2 are 2 graphic novels. The first one being Saga Volume 4. I did talk about this one in my haul video, I think, and sort of said that I would already finished it, that it wasn't my favourite, but I did like it. That still stands. I'm not really going to say too much more about that one, to be honest. And the next graphic novel, again, I've spoken about a bit already, but that is Morning Glories by Nick Spencer. Yeah, again, I really liked it. I want to read more of them and see what I think over time, so see how the story develops and how the characters develop. I did really like it. I did like the art style. Again, I spoke about it in my haul, so if you want to know a little bit more about what I thought of this one, check it out there. So the next book that I read was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. And I did like this one a lot. I thought when I was reading it I was going to give it 5 out of 5 stars. I didn't. I gave it 4 with my new thinky rating system, yes. And I'll go over some of the goods and the bads on this one and explain why I didn't get that 5. So I thought the prose was absolutely magical, absolutely stunning. And I thought the setting was a beautiful idea for a story, for a sort of challenge, which is what this is. I don't want to say too much about the plot because I went in pretty blind and I did enjoy that more, I think. I couldn't really have imagined a more compelling circus, or one I wanted to visit more. And I'd certainly read anything else the author chose to put out, because I do think it was really unique and it made me want to live in a fictional world that doesn't happen terribly often, and yeah, that seemed really nice to me. However, there was insta-love in here. I felt as though the characters didn't connect for a long enough period of time to have the feelings they had, and that was really disappointing because it's a relatively slow book. And there was time, it just wasn't used, and that irritated me immensely. And I thought the ending was a bit anticlimactic, to be honest, because it was such a slow build. I was expecting a pop. And we got a pop. It was fine, but it didn't blow me away. So 4 out of 5 stars. I'd still recommend it. Perhaps you'll love the ending. Perhaps you'll not find it insta-lovey at all, but I did, so 4 out of 5 stars. And the next book I read was The Moment by Claire Dyer. And I went into this book knowing I wouldn't like it, and I was right. And I don't think that was because I made it happen. I don't think that if I'd gone in a more positive way it would have changed anything. I find books like this so depressing, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you a little bit about the story. Essentially, we have these 2 characters who went out when they were in university. And they thought they were brilliant. They then went their own ways, got married, had children, they have a life. And they meet on the platform and they have to decide whether or not they want to go for coffee, essentially. And it's a bit like Just One Day, and it does take place in a day. It's just coffee. And it's supposed to be life-changing, and it's supposed to be like that one moment, and you know, you've met that person again, and what are you going to do? But it's not, and I didn't feel it, and the main character was so depressing. She spoke about her family and her husband, like she just didn't want to be involved with them at all. That doesn't change just because you see you're an old sweetheart in the street. If you are unhappy, you have to think about things, and potentially looking at changing things, and just think about your life. Like, she made me feel depressed about the potential future I might have having a husband and kids. And no, because it can be more than that. It can be more than just hating the person you're living with and hating the fact you have to care for your children and just thinking, oh, if only I could go off and sleep with this wonderful man. They're so frustrating to me. I don't know why I bother reading adult contemporaries. They just annoy me. This one just annoyed me just as much. And I don't have anything good to say about it, to be honest. Sorry, 1 out of 5 stars. And the last book that I wanted to talk about is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Dower. It's a big book, I'm trying to keep it in shot for you. Yeah, I did really enjoy this one. This one got a 4 out of 5 stars for me. It wasn't perfect in all respects. I did have a few sort of issues with it, but I really did enjoy it, and it was tough to fault it, to be honest. But I came away feeling as though whilst I'd enjoyed it very much, it wasn't a book that should make that 5 out of 5 for me. There are a few things that I knew I didn't quite suit. So I'll go over some of the positives for you first. The most sort of aesthetic, the cover's beautiful, and we have the foldy pages. I'm a fan of those. The writing in it was also beautiful. The descriptions were vivid. I felt as though we had a very clear scene, especially of the sort of island that the characters end up on. I felt as though I knew the place very well, and the characters seemed to fit well in there, and that house was very... It stuck with me, really. I can still imagine how the inside of that house would look now, so that's very powerful for me. I thought the characters were good. I didn't think they were equal. I felt that Werner was a more interesting character than Marie, especially during his training section. I found that really intriguing, and I didn't feel they were balanced, particularly, and she had a very quiet, still life, really, and he doesn't, and it just meant that I personally was more drawn to his storyline. That said, I really wanted more of a connection between our two characters. I can't say too much because I don't want to spoil, but you read a storyline, and it's a big book, and you're reading a multi-perspective novel, and they are in similar areas of the world. It doesn't really take a spoiler to know that at some point they're probably going to interact in some way, if not meet physically, to have some kind of interaction. And I didn't feel as though the connection were enough. It didn't satisfy me in that way. I found that quite frustrating actually toward the end. And there were also times when I felt as though whilst oppression and stress were present, the war was terribly far away. I didn't feel the closeness of it. I didn't feel the fear of the characters. I just felt the oppression. I felt it was more of a nuisance. Maybe that's how it was supposed to be put across. I just didn't see fear. And to be in the middle of the Second World War and people are bombing you, I want to be, I'd be terrified. And I want to see some people be terrified because they could die. And I didn't really see it. Do tell me if you think I'm wrong on this point, because I did think when I finished it, probably there are lots of lines that would imply that. You just missed them, but I didn't want to have to go back and read the entire thing again ASAP. But do tell me, because I did enjoy it, and I suspect I will reread it in future. So, yeah, 4 out of 5 stars because of those two things, really. But I absolutely did enjoy it, and I can see why it's been so popular. Okay, so I suspect that's been a pretty long video, despite the fact I'm trying to split them down into 2 halves. I don't really know what else to do other than weeklies, but we'll see how that goes. We'll see how sort of bi-monthlies go, and if they're still really long and you guys are bored, then I will go to weeklies. I'd ideally like not to go to weeklies, because some weeks I might read 13 and some I might read 2. Though I don't have even weeks, but we'll see. We'll see. So I really hope you enjoyed my video. I will see you in the next one, and have a lovely evening. Bye bye.